Well, hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the stream. Hope you're able to join in live this week. If you're on PTO because of the holidays or just kind of jumping in, I'm glad for folks that join live. I see that Kevin's on the chat. Hello, Kevin. I said hello on chat already. Anybody else who's on the live chat, please say hello. I love to interact with folks during the stream. So what we're going to be focusing on today is something fun that I ran into in the last week or so, doing some refactoring. So I may have mentioned before that I'm trying to help out with testing on the official React Native end-to-end tests. There's an app within the React Native repo. You can check it out on GitHub if you go here, Facebook/React Native. And there's an app built in to the source code called RNTester. You can load it up on iOS. I think it's not currently working on Android. But it lets you, as you scroll through the list here, you can see a whole bunch of the different components and then APIs that React Native makes available. And it's an app that runs them all. So you can try them out to make sure that things are still working. For example, if you click on buttons, it shows an example of a simple button you can press and it works, and a disable button, and you can make sure that tapping on it doesn't do anything. So you can manually test using this app to make sure that React Native is still working well. And the React Native team is wanting to automate more and more tests within here. So as we've been looking into this and how to do this, one of the things we've run into is that a difficulty when you are have something you need to scroll. I think DatePicker iOS might be an example of this. Yeah, so when we click on DatePicker iOS, we have these components here. But then if you scroll down, there's more stuff, including the time picker. And the way Detox works, the testing library, is that it won't let you interact with elements that aren't actually shown on the screen. And so this is great because it actually confirms that you're not accidentally thinking something's interactable when it's not really. But it gets challenging when you have to decide, you're writing an automated test, and you have to decide how far down to scroll. I haven't actually looked how they've implemented this, so let's take a look and see. In the RNTester folder in React Native, you can go into the E2E folder, and I think it's the DatePicker iOS test here. So let's see. I could have looked into this in advance. Maybe not. Maybe that test wasn't included because it was hard to scroll down to there. This is definitely something that I've run into. I think it was the switch test that I was running, where I didn't test anything that was off the bottom of the screen. So let's look that one up. I'll show you that search in just a minute. So I wrote the switch test the other day, and I set tests for these initial switches. This is feeling wrong. This feels like I think somebody else wrote the switch test. So which ones did I write? Was it the picker? Was it the touchable? I think it was the touchable. This doesn't matter too much, but I want to get this straight in my own head. So there's the touchable inputs here. You can see on the touchable screen, we can tap and get some feedback. Tap here with some output here. We can tap here. But then this stuff is off the bottom. Touchable feedback events for that. That's off the bottom of the screen, and so I did not write tests for those because I wanted a reliable way to get to it. Kevin says you're doing dishes and cooking and you're keeping it in the background. That's great. Hey, multitasking. That's really great. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. It's been fun experimenting with React Native this week. Independently of this stuff, I've gotten a little Expo side project together in a couple days and was able to publish it. Not publish it, but publish it to Expo and get it running on my phone really quickly. So I really enjoyed Expo and the productivity it offered. So looking forward to maybe streaming about that sometime soon. I put together a blog post talking about how lessons that I learned from kind of shipping the side project really quickly. So I'll post that in the chat and on Twitter a little bit later if you're interested in checking it out. So thanks for asking. Okay, so we have these tests here. So let's think about what we could do to make it easier. Because one of the initiatives we're trying to do here is to make it easier for any of you watching this stream or the recording, or any members of the React Native community to contribute end-to-end tests to React Native. That's a way that we could all really help out. And so one way that that'll be easy, the main screen of the tester app already has this search functionality. So check this out. If I type touchable up here, it filters the list to just show me the touchable element, and so it's really easy to get to it. So what we want to do, and Eli from the React Native team, the idea he had would be to have a similar filter or search box at the top of each of these example pages. So that if I want to get down to touchable feedback events, I could just search in a box up here for touchable feedback events, and it would come up. So basically we want to take this search box that's right now coupled to one screen, the original example list screen, and we want to make it reusable so that we can reuse it on an individual example screen as well. So this is going to involve some refactoring. We've got some existing code we want to keep working just as is, but we want to move it around to use it in a new way. And there's a great, very popular quote from Kent Beck that is often applied in situations like this. It was on Twitter, actually, which is interesting to have a very influential quote live canonically on Twitter. And he says, "For each desired change, make the change easy, warning, this may be hard, and then make the easy change." So don't try to do all of that at once. First, rearrange your code, refactor your code so that the change will be easy, and then make that change. In other words, a way that I've heard it said is refactor your code so it looks like you were intending to do it this way from the start. And that ensures that you don't have a bunch of hacks and workarounds in your code and things work well. So specifically what I want to do is I want to take this search functionality and refactor it out to some kind of reusable component so I could use it just not on this screen but also on the individual example screens as well. And this is one of those days where I've worked through this on my own. I actually have a PR up on the React Native repo right now. So I've worked through this, so I've got my cheater monitor over to the side with the code that's already working. This just ensures that we have a good stream experience together as we work through it. One important note as well, if I do this right, it's going to look very intentional and that things go very smoothly. If that's the case, just know that there was some experimentation that was involved. As I was going through and doing different parts of the refactoring, I found out that different things were needed in different ways. And so if this goes smoothly, just know that it doesn't always go smoothly to do a refactoring like this in real life. Experimentation is involved, and you try things out, and then if it doesn't work, you roll back and try something new with what you learned. But as long as you're learning something, you're making forward progress. So with that in place, let's do this refactoring. Let's walk through refactoring the code to be able to have this search component on the individual example screens. All right, let's get started. My alignment of my two screens is a little bit weird. So first we need to find out where stuff is, and this took me a little experimentation because I am fairly new to the RNTester code base. But as I looked through here, what I found was there's this class RNTester example list, a module, I should say, a file. And in here, we have a row component, which is an individual row. And then down here, we have the named RNTester example list. And you see here, we have a filter string in the state. And so this starts to look like something that we're looking for. We make a regular expression out of the filter. And then we've got a filter function here that's going to go through and is going to look through all of these example.modules. We pass it an example, and then it returns true or false, depending on if we should include it in the filter. And then we have a list of sections, so components and APIs. And so this actually corresponds, you can see here in the simulator, components is right there. And if I scroll down, you can see APIs right here. So we have this array of two elements. One is components and one is APIs. And then each one has a data key, and that itself has an array underneath it. So you can see we're applying this, using just the JavaScript array filter function here, passing in the filter we provided, and then we're filtering down the data that's passed along to the rest of the render function to render out these sections. So this is the functionality. This, right now, in RNTester example list, that's where the filter functionality lives that we want to pull out and reuse. So we've got this kind of general filter functionality, the filter state that we'd like to not have to reinvent and rewrite somewhere else. And then we have this specific functionality here where we're hard coding the list. This specific screen has a list of components and a list of APIs. So that is not going to be the case on all the other screens we go into. That's going to be kind of different. So as I'm thinking about refactoring, what I want to do is take small steps and ensure that the tests are still passing. And so the smallest step that I'd like to take is to extract this functionality out so that I have one component that does the filtering generically, and then another component that does the displaying of the RNTester example list in particular. And I think I'm going to use like a render prop to kind of pass in the specifics of what it should be rendering out. So we'll give that a try, and I definitely think that because I've done it before. So we'll give that a shot. Before we jump in, I do want to run our detox tests. I have a lot of other streams and blog posts and examples about detox if you haven't used it before. But I'm just going to run this detox test command. I'm going to run it in a simulator debug mode so that all of our changes to the production code will show up right away. But as I run this, it's going to just run over here in the simulator. And it takes a little while because these are end-to-end tests. They're not the fastest thing in the world. But by running through these, I'm going to be able to confirm that we haven't broken anything. And probably what I'll do is when I've made a change, I'll get the test running, and then I'll go ahead and start thinking ahead about what I want to change next while the tests are running to make sure things are okay. And the tests do actually use the search functionality. So you can see there, it's typing in switch into the search box, and that's coming up. And so the test should break if we somehow break that box. And certainly if we have any syntax errors or undefined variables or anything like that, our React Native app is going to blow up and the tests aren't going to pass there. So this test coverage is going to give us confidence that we're going to be able to refactor things. And so even though we don't have full test coverage of the entire RNTester app, the tests we do have are going to give us some confidence in refactoring. And by having that confidence, we can take smaller steps. We don't have to reinvent the world all at once here. We can just do it one little piece at a time. So while these are running, I'm going to go ahead and think about what I'm going to extract. And another note, we are using flow here. This is done by Facebook. So we've got some flow types. I think, yeah, type even here. I'd never touched flow until I got into the RNTester. And so this is one of the reasons I'm very glad I do have some example code to look at where I've got it passed. But I'm not going to run flow until the end. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to defer that because it's not something that I'm comfortable with as much. I'm just going to work kind of one commit at a time, getting the JavaScript functionality working, and we'll get all the types to line up at the end. Cool. Okay, so what do we want to do? I think I want to have a filter component. And so let's just start by giving it a name. Let's say class RNTester filter. I'll say example filter. Extends react.component. We're not going to pass in any types here. We're just going to leave it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start roughly copying and pasting whatever functionality is in the RNTester example list that looks like I'm going to need it generally anywhere I need a filter. We can see here that the test passed. So we say that all the tests and all the test suites for Detox passed. So that confirms that everything is working at our starting point. We're on a branch here I created called example search stream. It's just branched off of master as of the point that I started working on this example. Okay, so the example filter. Probably this component is what's going to have the actual filter state itself, and that's nice to encapsulate that, so we don't need to rewrite that. How about in the render method? Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the component's going to have a render method, so let's just do that. And let's just carry stuff over. Okay, so here, let's think about this as we're going through. We're extracting the filter text out of the state, and then we're creating a regular expression. Huh. I'm not sure I quite follow what's going on here. Oh, okay. We create a default filter regular expression, just confirming that something's present, and then we try to overwrite it with a new regular expression made from the typed in filter text. And then if there's a problem, we just throw a console.warning, and then we don't overwrite it, so that the default filter regular expression is to match anything. And that's why when you haven't typed anything in, all of the examples show up here in the list. So that makes sense. So all of this would come over, I think, just as is. And this is some nice implementation details. It'll be nice not to have in two places for sure, and not even having them in the example list. So those things will happen. Let's not delete them out of the other RNTester example list yet. Let's copy over what we need, and then we'll see what we're going to do. Okay, so next we have this filter function, and this is you pass in an example. There's some flow stuff, and then we say, okay, we should include this if filter is disabled. So somewhere there's a disable search flag that can just turn off filtering entirely, in which case we would want to return all the examples. So that seems fine. We could probably, let's include that for now, and then we'll see if we want to move that out later. Again, we don't want to overthink things right now. We just want to put search-related stuff in one place, filter-related stuff in one place. So if search is disabled, show the thing, or if the filter regular expression matches the example.module.title. So there's some data structure that has a module title. So okay, this is the main filtering here, where we say we're checking against the title and we're seeing if it matches the regular expression. And there's something else here. And make sure the platform is not TV, so Apple TV, or make sure the example supports tvOS. So this is just removing things. If you are on Apple TV, removing things that aren't supported there. We're not on Apple TV, but we can move that over as is, so that's fine. So this is all general filter-related stuff, so let's move it over. We'll come back to this example module title in a little bit, because we're going to need to dig into that data structure. But for right now, this is one of the nice things about taking these small refactoring steps. We don't have to figure out all of this at once. We can just say, hey, all I'm doing right now is just for this one case, not generalizing this to two cases yet, I'm putting the filtering-related concerns for the example list in another component. So we'll figure out this data structure later. For right now, we'll just copy this filter function over here, creating this filter. So that's fine. Okay, now we've got defining these sections. So when I was first doing this, I passed these in as well. So let's see here, looking at my example code. Sorry, just kind of making sure we have a good experience here. Filter props, RNTesting, example filter. And I do move those over. So let's, just to follow along with the examples I have, let's move this over. Clearly this couples us to the data of this specific example, but just to keep this in one place, let's move this over so we can see it, so we can visualize it in front of us, and then we can kind of pull it out. And I think there we'll do this in a bit of a different order than we did this in my sample code. So I'll move these sections up here. These are the sections that are going to be filtered through because we're applying that. So then we've got our sections, our filtered data, our data with the filter applied out of here. So then now we've got these sections, and then we're rendering this out. We're rendering out this view, and then the title input, the text input. So this is going to be this text input here for the search, and we can confirm that. Let's make sure that's what that is. Render text input. If disable search, just return null. Otherwise, return a text input that says search as a placeholder. So that looks right. That looks like what we're seeing over there. And then we're applying it to the filter state. So certainly that's going to come over as well. So I think what I want to do, actually of all these things here, I think all that I want to move up from a rendering standpoint is this rendering out of the text input. I think I want the title row to stay here in RNTester example list. And I think rendering out this section list, I want to keep here in the example list because that's specific. I think I just want the text input, but I think I do want to carry over that text input because this doesn't need to be the most generalizable thing in the world. I want to reuse, not having to recreate this search text input. So let's just move that over. I'm going to copy this return block, and then we'll just paste it in here. And so then I'm going to say, what am I going to do here? Okay, let's have a surrounding view just because we want to return one thing. That's going to introduce a new view into the hierarchy, but that should be fine. We don't need a title row, but we do need a text input. And so then I think I want to actually do a render prop here. So do this.props.render, render, and then I want to pass it the sections. So these sections that we've filtered down with this filtered data, I want to pass this through to the render prop, and then that's going to in turn render out this section list. So now we have those rendering specifics separated out. We do need this render text input, so let's copy that over. Item should update, I'm not sure. Let's come back to that. Render text input. Handle row press we probably don't need, hopefully. So now in our new search component we've got render text input, and this is what has the reference to disable search, as well as the search row style, as well as the filter state. So we set up the filter state up here. We use it in the render method to do the filtering, and then we present this component to allow you to control the filter state. So this has moved a lot of filter-related stuff into this one filter component, and we are hopefully going to use this render prop to render out the details in the child. So let's save that. So now let's see, now that this component has been extracted, let's see how we can use, where is it? The RNTester example filter down below here. So in the RNTester example list, I'm not going to remove this existing stuff right now. Let's get things passing before we delete it out. So we don't need the render text input anymore because this is where we're going to put the RNTester example filter. And we're going to need to pass a few props into it. I think it's going to need a whole lot of the props that are passed into the parent there. Not that style, but let's see. Filter, let's just search for this .props. I guess if I was using prop types, I could see what's going on. Disable search, and then list. So list is passed in, so let's pass those along. For both of those, we'll do disable search, props, disable search, list equals this props list. I suppose we could just spread the props out, but let's make this contract between these two components explicit right now. I think that's fine. Okay, disable search, list, and then that render prop. Disable search. Yeah, so that's all the props that are needed by the example filter. And so now we need the actual render prop. So we'll say render, and we'll take let's do a function here. And then inside this function, that's where we're going to, we don't need to render out the text input because that's handled by the example filter. And now is where we're going to pass in this section list as a part of the render prop method. So we're going to need to see what is passed into here. Render item equals this render item. Okay, so that's still a part of this parent here. Item should update, render section header. So sections is coming back out of here. So let's, so here we're going to take out sections, pass in the sections into the render prop, because that's what we did up here. In the filter method, we're passing sections in, and then we take sections out here, and then they should be rendered out. So it's now the filtered sections that happen there. So you see now this RNTester example filter component, it's not a renderless component because we're rendering out the filter input, but it's handling the filtering ourselves. So we just pass it in the list of data we've received from elsewhere, and it gives us out the filtered sections that are going to be passed in to be rendered. So this might work. Let's save it. Let's just reload the app before we even run the detox test to make sure it even comes up. And it comes up. So now let's run those detox tests to see if things pass as we're going. And we'll let that go. We could probably even stop the test early as we see that just one test case passes. We see that the search happens. Now there's, as I mentioned, we haven't removed a lot from the RNTester example list yet, but I want to see it passing in this short example first. Yeah, and so things are coming up. The search works, switch comes up. So now I feel confident. Let's do some commits here. I'm going to actually do small commits on this branch here because I'm afraid that I might mess things up. So for all of our experience, it'll be better if I commit this. Extract filter component. So we'll extract that out. So now let's remove the redundant filter state and logic from the example list because it's not being used anymore. We don't need this state. We don't need to set up the filter regex or this filter function. And we don't need the sections. So this is interesting. We're going to want to put these back in just a second. I think that's what we're going to do next. But right now, we've removed these sections up here into here. And so this part of the render method is not needed. So let's move that out. But we still have this. Detox is the Cypress of React Native. You're absolutely right. So I actually found out about Detox and about Cypress at the same time. And at that time, I was kind of discouraged about testing any native application stuff, as well as discouraged about testing front-end apps in general. And Detox and Cypress together both got me super pumped about testing JavaScript apps. So I love Detox and I love Cypress. Highly recommend either of them for sure. All right, so item should update. That's referenced here, so that should live in this component. Render item, I think that's referenced up here. Yeah, render title row. Again, I decided that that should stay in RNTester example list, but render text input. This is the filter text input. So this is something that I moved up, so we can remove that out. But now handle row press still happens here. So looks like the app got into a weird state because I stopped in the middle of a test. So let's just rerun Detox Test to get it working again, and we'll make sure that things work here. I might need to restart the simulator if I messed it up. Yeah, it looks like I messed it up. It was getting started. It came up. Let's rerun Detox. So while this is going, arrogantly assuming that it works, let's think about what we've done. We've taken one component, RNTester example list, that worked totally fine so far, but with this new requirement that's come in to add filtering to other parts of the app, we now find the RNTester example list has multiple responsibilities. Some folks will say that you should never write code that has multiple responsibilities. Everything should have a single responsibility, and I think that's great, but sometimes what a single responsibility is differs depending on what your requirements are. So now that we have a new requirement, we found that filtering has become a separate responsibility. A responsibility that we'd like to be able to reuse. So we've made progress here by separating things out, by having filtering in one place and displaying of the example list in particular in another place. So that's progress, and I want to commit it. We're going to say remove unused filtering code from example list. Cool. So there is something that I didn't notice my first run through here until a bit later in my refactoring progress that's a problem. So although this is filtering functionality, but it's still very specific and very coupled to the example list where we're getting data, we're expecting it to have a very specific structure. It should have component section and an API section. And we're not dictating how those are displayed because we have a render prop that we pass things down to, but we are dictating that this is the structure the data must have. And things would be more reusable if we take a step towards moving this back into the example list component. So I think what we could do, thinking ahead for the first time that I've coded through this, is just to take in a list of sections, but not making assumptions about what they are in here. And so let me copy and paste sections back over into RNTester example list. This is going to happen in the render method, but the filtering isn't going to happen here. We're just going to take props list component examples there and API examples there, and have unfiltered sections happen here. And then we're going to want to pass, instead of passing in the list, because I don't think we're going to need the list anymore, we're going to pass in the sections into RNTester example filter. And they're going to get sections back out, the filtered sections back out. So let me jump back over to the cheater monitor here and see if I can find out, make filter agnostic of sections passed in. I'm going to want to look and see how I ended up doing this. So this is, I'm looking at resulting code here. So when you're coding this, it's going to take some experimentation unless you're much better or know the code much better than I do. So just don't be discouraged if things don't go as fast as things are going here. And I'm always knocking on wood because I could still totally mess things up. So we'll just find out together if I do that. Okay, cool. So we're passing it in. We're setting up those sections in the RNTester example list. So if we're passing in this data already configured this way, what do we want to do up here in the filter component? Well, what we can do is, instead of defining the sections here, this is the place where we get the data filtered. So what are we going to do instead? I'm going to say sections here, and let's call it filtered sections to be clear, just to make sure we don't get confused. We can take this, props, sections, and then we're going to map. So whatever elements are in the sections array, we can be flexible. We'll go with whatever you give us. We're going to map through that, and then we're going to say, take the section. Okay, so what do we want to return from there? Let's see if that wraps. It's just too long. That's unfortunate. So a section, we know from looking down here, is an object that has data, title, and key. And all we want to do is change the data property to filter it. So what we can do here to make this as generalized as easily possible, we can say, okay, let's use object spread to just give us everything, all the keys in the section. But then we're going to overwrite one of the keys. We're going to give a different value for the data key. So for the data key, instead, we're going to take the section.data and we're going to apply filter to it. Filter using filter. So we're going to say for that data array that we have, apply the filter, which is just the function we set up here, that's going to check the filter regular expression we have and other stuff as well. I'm getting some linter errors here. Looks like I resolved most of them. This is going to want to... What does it want? Oh, prettier doesn't want me to wrap the line like that. Let me give myself a little space because I like when this is on one line as well. There we go. That's nice. Okay. So we're now filtering whatever sections we get and applying the filter. And so you can see this is not as coupled to this example list. Let's actually pass in filtered sections as a named property down to the render prop, the render function. And that's just going to make it a bit more explicit. I think we're getting a linter error. Yeah, so ESLint doesn't want us to shadow variables. And so we have sections here. And so ESLint is helpfully having us here take filtered sections there. So this is confirming we pass the sections to RNTester example filter and we receive the filtered sections back. So using naming there, this is what people mean when they refer to code being self-documented. Maybe you want comments as well, but this is at least using the variable names to more clearly communicate what we've done, what's coming in and what's going out. So I think this will work. So we can rerun the test now and see if they do. Nope, we don't need to make another commit. We want to do another detox test run. Cool. While this is starting out, I'm gonna look over here to see add filtering to example container. Yeah. Oh, and we have extracting it to a separate file. So that could be another thing we do. I think I'm going to extract it to another file and then start to work with the types because I think that's going to be more helpful to have the types in a separate file. We'll see how that works. Okay, looks like some tests passed. I didn't see them. You guys saw them. So I'm going to look. Okay, it seems like it's working. This is enough changes. Let's let the test run all the way through. I can make a commit in another terminal real quick while we're here, just to kind of keep it going. Okay, remove So remove knowledge of example list from filter component. So now if we review our code, we can see that the example list sets up the unfiltered version of the sections, goes to the example filter, and then takes the filtered sections and renders them out. And then the example filter now just has some filter logic, takes in any kind of sections, and maps through them and filters them out. So now we've decoupled our example filter from any knowledge of the example list in particular. There's still some details of the data structure, and those can be maybe improved more in the future. But that's good for now. And this keeps things separate enough that I kind of feel happy moving it into another file now. And that could help increase the separation so that we can kind of see things and better visualize what's going on. And all of our detox tests have passed, so that's great. So now I think we've made all our commits. We're good. Let's create a new file. And I want to name the file... Oh, Frank says, can you explain how the tweet you mentioned earlier reflects what you refactored up until now? Yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's great. So in the tweet I mentioned, I said, for each desired change, make the change easy. Warning, this may be hard. Then make the easy change. Thank you for that question, Kevin. That's awesome. Yeah, so far we haven't changed any of the existing functionality of the app. We haven't moved really towards adding filtering to any of these example screens. They're still just as filter free as usual. What we're doing is we're refactoring the code so it'll be easy to add the filtering into there. We want to create this, let me find it. We want to create this example filter component. We want it to be a component that we could just drop in exactly as is to one of these example screens and get the filtering we need. But it was not yet ready to go. The code was not ready to go there because that filtering concern was all intermixed with the example list. So what we're doing now is we're refactoring to make the change easy. That is to say, we're refactoring to get to the point where we have a nice, reusable, ready-to-go example filter component so that the final change, the commit where we actually add the filtering to an example screen, is going to be nice and small. It's going to look like we planned that all along. I think that'll become clearer as we walk through the examples and get it out there, and then I can go back and describe it and describe the alternative, which would be to make all the changes all at once. So let me know if that makes sense so far, and I think we'll get even more clarity as we walk through the examples. But I'm really glad you asked that right now so I could start to clarify. You said, gotcha, thanks, great. Okay, cool. So now we've extracted this class into the same file, and I did that just to kind of get extra certainty. And as is often the case, I'm going to name the file after the main component that's in it. So we're just going to create an RNTester example filter file here. Currently, RNTester is organized with pretty flat directory structure. We're working on another PR to kind of reorganize that, but for now, that's what we have. So I'm just going to paste it in. We're going to move the RNTester example filter over, and by moving this into another file, some of the dependencies here are going to become more clear. So we've got that. I think ESLint is already yelling at us about some of these dependencies, but we already know we're going to want import React from React. What else? Let's let the linter guide us. We need platform, and so I'm just going to look at the existing file to pull things out. Platform is being imported here at the top. Oh, I missed the license file and the use strict command, so I'm going to do that. Apparently the way this is set up here, we're using ES5, or there's some benefit to be doing use stricts in an ES5 mode, although we do have classes as well. But I'm following the conventions of the project. They got use strict, I'll use strict. Oh, and I even see here that React is imported in a different way, possibly because it's referenced within the project itself. I want to stick with the conventions of the project wherever possible, so that's just going to avoid, this. Maybe you are an expert in working in the React Native code base. I am not, so I want to do things the way they have it. That's going to be helpful. We've got Vue itself imported from React Native, so let's pull that over. And I'm pulling over the minimal things that I want, because I want this file to be minimal and only show the requirements that it has. We are using a view here. We have a styles object here with search row in it. So let's look into that next. Well, let's pull in the components first. We have text input, so that's going to be easy to pull over. Text input is there. Is that all the components we have? Looks like it. What's this? Need a blank line. Insert new line. Okay, so we have a styles object. So in RNTester example list, they have the convention of one styles object at the bottom. It's a style sheet, and it has a few different style sheet items inside it. So let's copy over just one thing at a time. Put the styles in here. What styles do we have? Oh, it's already yelling at us. Oh, we need style sheet itself, so that's good. Bring that over. Doesn't want that. All right, well, whatever. This is not telling me my ES linter. Where are my styles? Oh, it's not airing out anymore because styles now exist as an object, and the properties, the linter can't tell that they're not there. So let's just see. Styles.searchRow is used. So let's move that over. Search row. And I'm pretty sure search text input is also used. So let's just copy both of those over. Search row and search text input. Styles.searchRow and styles.searchText input are there. So those are moved over. Let's go ahead and remove those out of this file so we can start to see what's not needed because the linter is not going to pick that up. Okay, the linter isn't seeing any other problems, so that might be all we need. Oh, we are going to need to export the component. Can we, let's just do it up here. V. Raffaelli says, hey. Hey, you removed. Looks like you're in the process of asking a question, so please ask that question and I will jump on it as soon as you have it in. Now going back to the code, I think they might export the default in a different convention. Yeah, they're using module.exports. And so again, I want to follow the conventions here. For all I know, things would blow up if I didn't do this. Export the RNTester example filter. Okay, so now let's go back over and import it into here. We're going to import. In fact, let's delete it, and we'll see what is going to be asked of us as a part of that. Under text input. Okay, so now we've got an error. RNTester example filter is needed. So just like RNTester actions is imported from the same folder, we'll import example filter. And now the linter is helpfully already telling us some things that are not used. So platform is never used anymore because we've moved it out into the filter, so we can remove that. You could run the code. If your code's not set up to error out, you could run the code as a smaller step to make sure it doesn't blow up before you remove these things. If you want a text style prop, I think that might have actually never been used in the first place, so let's just remove that. This is a warning about an inline style. We'll fix that separately. Everything else seems fine, and we removed those properties of the style sheet that weren't needed at the time. So I think we might be good here. V. Raffaelli says, you removed, but maybe they're needed in previous file, the styles properties. That's a great point. We don't know for sure, so let's check and see. Yeah, I was using my existing knowledge. I think I double checked this when I did this coding before. So styles.searchRow, the linter would not catch if those are still used. So let's search in this file. Okay, search row is not found, and search text input is not found. So yeah, I think in this case, those styles are not used in this file. That does make sense because our search-related stuff was pulled out into the filter here, but we don't know that for sure. The linter can't tell us that, and so you're absolutely right to be cautious there. That's the way I do it as well, especially with styles, because it might just look differently and your test might not fail afterwards. Cool. So let's run the detox test and let's see if things work right now. I don't think the packager would need to be rerun with this new file that we created. I think it'll pick it up just fine. So let's check it out and see. Okay, it didn't blow up. It searched, it pulled up the button page. So yeah, cool. Looks like we made progress. I feel confident enough to stop the test at this point, and let's just make this commit. So we have the new file, the example filter, and the removed code out of the RNTester example list. Extract filter to another file. All right, so we're doing this in a bit of a different order, but we may be just about ready to add this functionality into the individual examples. I think I want to do that before I add the flow types in, because again, I'm not that familiar with flow, and so I'm mostly going to be copying and pasting the example flow code that I have. I'm sure we would get a flow warning. One thing that I found with that is to make sure you add the flow annotation at the top of the file so that flow will run against this file and tell you when types are missing and things like that. But yeah, let's get the functionality working first, and then we can think about the types afterwards. And if you know much about types and tests, you know the mentality about types that I'm working with in here, and that's just where we are. We'll do another stream about types and tests some future day. Okay, so yeah, let me get my cheater code up to see what I'm doing. Extract inline style, add use strict. Yeah, get show. Oh, we should look at the data here to think through the data. So this is a bit of a side tour just to kind of think through what we're doing. We have our RNTester example list. Let's find the component. There it is. And we can see here that this.props.list is passed in. And that's where the component examples and the API examples are coming from. So that's where all the data in here is coming from. So let's go find that data to be able to see what it's like. We can search through the project for usages of RNTester example list. Okay, and we see that it's imported into RNTester app.android and .ios. So let's look at the iOS one because that's where we're running. So we have the RNTester example list here. And then it's used down in here. So this is the render method of the RNTester app. That makes sense that an app itself is using the example list and rendering it out. And we passed in this. The list is the RNTester list. So let's find out what that is. We'll search within the file. That's imported from rntesterlist.ios. So this is starting to look promising. So here we go. So we have a variable called component examples. And each item in here, it has a key, a module, and a flag about supports tvOS. So we saw that conditional check there before. And then the module is actually just requiring a module from the same folder and then just putting the entire contents of that require into the module key. Into the module. And then there's the key as well, which is used for just kind of, I think that's used for the rendering key within React itself. So let's look up one of these. Button example is nice and straightforward, so let's look up that module. So button example, so you pull that up in here. We can see that in here we're exporting, there's the name, and so that shows up there. The description, simple React Native button component, and that shows up down below. So you can see that this is where these fields are that are showed up there. And then we also have .examples. And this is where we have a title, a description, and then a render function. So if we go in here into the button, we have a title, simple button, a description, that text there, and then the render function that's going to render it out. So this is very useful. So this is a file that you would live in if you were writing out the Detox Test for the button example or creating new things in the button example itself. So this is a file that day to day, once we get things set up well for myself and others to add new examples and new tests into the RNTester, this is a file you'll be living in. But we can see that this is the structure of the file. And so we look in the example list here. This is the list of the data we're going through. This component examples is the same as this component examples. And I think we'll see if we look in here that API examples is also exported. So API examples and component examples are exported out. Okay. So, but then what's passed in, or really what happens once we select one of these? Well, we can see in example list, there is a, not item should update. There is a handle row press. Let's see where that's called from. Oh, is that in, let's see if I extracted that out. I'm not sure where handle row press is called from. Clearly it works. Interesting. I'm not actually sure how that is passed in. Maybe that's not used. But regardless, there's an on navigate that's passed in, it looks like. So let's see here. Up at the RNTester app.ios, we have a on navigate is this .handle action. We're looking in here. There's RNTester navigation reducer, and you'll notice that this is actually, RNTester is not actually using a navigation library, although React navigation is recommended in the RN docs. It's not within React Native itself, and it's not currently used. There's been discussion about adding that into RNTester. I don't think anyone would probably be opposed to that, but right now we're not using a navigation library. We can look up what RNTester navigation reducer is. Can we even open that? Yeah, we can command click. Visual Studio Code is pretty sweet. And so in here, we can see that we're just setting the example module. This is just returning a new state. So probably we should look in here. I remember I was kind of tracing through this and figuring out what we need to do. So this is saying, okay. Yeah, so this is what it is. This is saying if they're in the state of the application component, if we're saying, hey, open an example, do this, otherwise render the whole list. So this is where we need to be here. We're pulling the component out of RNTester list.modules, and then we're rendering RNTester example container, passing the component into it, which is really the configuration for the component. So RNTester example container is where we're going to want to go. And so let's kind of see this to visualize it. This is where we're going to want to drop in the example. We see here render example. There's an RNTester block, but here's the render method. So let's look at this render method. This is kind of a tutorial here on how to kind of get used to a new code base you haven't worked in before, or that you've worked in once before earlier this week that you're trying to get up to speed on while doing a live stream, as in my case. So we're looking at the render method here. We see that it renders out an RNTester page. And that's kind of a surrounding thing. Presumably that's like the header and stuff like that. And then we're going through here for each of the examples. We're mapping through it, and we're calling this render example method. And I would assume that that would be each one of these. We can, yeah. So notice here we're rendering out all the examples. And right now we just take the whole hard-coded list. So this is where we would want to add the filtering in. So we've made the change easy. And so my theory is that now we're going to be able to make the easy change. We're going to be able to add the filtering in easily by importing this filtering component we've created and using it within the RNTester example container. So let's see if we can do that. Example list, example filter. So let's import the example filter here. RNTester example filter. So now we've got the RNTester example filter. And let's do it here, RNTester example filter. And we know we're going to have a render prop. It was filtered examples. And in here, this is where we would render out filtered examples.map and then render it out. So again, the idea here, need curly's there. The idea here is that we're just dropping in. I'm sure there's something else that I'm going to need to do. We're dropping in this RNTester example filter component, and we're going to filter out everything that we need. That's the hope. What is the linter saying? Do I have something wrong? Delete out. No, we just want to do it like that. Prettier just wants to do it like that. Or like that. Okay, all right, Prettier, we'll do it your way. I don't have Prettier auto formatting set up on here because I don't use it day to day. Okay, so there's other props we need to pass into example filter, so let's think through that. We can just look on the example list. Disable search, and in this case there's not an option to disable search, so let's just say, maybe we'll find later that we want to pass that in. We can just say false for now. And then what are the sections that are being passed in? So this is something where we probably actually want to know. It's probably actually these examples here. But I think this structure is going to be a bit different. I'm going to actually try this and then see if that's the case. I think it's going to blow up because that's what happened when I was coding this out myself. But something like this is what we're going to want to be able to do. If we reload the app, the main page shows up. When we click on button, we get an error. It says undefined is not an object, evaluating section.data.filter. So this is in RNTester example filter. And we can see in here, so we're iterating through sections, and then we say section.data.filter. So what's going on here, in case it's not obvious, is in the example list, we set up this array that has two sections. And then in there, each one has a data, a title, and a key. But that's not the case on the example container page. There's not two sections, there's just one. So as far as I'd coded this so far, like it would be nice if you didn't even needed to know about this idea of sections. But what we can do for now is just create like a sections variable here that just has one section. And we can just give it the title examples, a key of E, and then a key of E, that sounds musical. And we can pass in this.props.modules.examples. This is the props that we already had in the first place, so that should work just fine. And so now the data that we pass into here, into sections, has the structure of the sections.data array and work through there. And then down in here, what we're going to do, it's not filtered examples, it's filtered sections. And then in filtered sections, we're going to get back this an array of sections. We're going to just take the first, and we're going to take .data, because we don't actually need the title and the key. In fact, I think I could actually just remove those. So let me actually just do this. To do remove the following keys. This is data that was needed in the other case, but we don't need here. So this is not the most ideal. This is something where the data structure that example list and example container need are slightly different. And maybe if we thought about it more, we could think about another way to restructure it. So, but for now, I think this may at least get it passing. So let's give it a try. And we're getting close to an hour, so it might be good to get this working. You reload, the main page comes up, which is fine. That's as expected. We click on button. Oh, example.module.title is not working. Okay, so something is off. And so let me look through here and see what I did in the cheater code to figure it out. Oh, I don't have a filter I'm passing in. Oh, then I need to extract a filter. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is something else that is needed. So this was an example of one of the dead ends that I came into before, where I found part of the problem here is that this filter method here is checking for disable search, and it's checking for example.module.title, and these examples aren't coming from a module, and so that would be kind of tedious. So really what we found here is that the logic to do the filtering here is also something that's specific to the example list that we don't want to replicate in the example container. And so what I want to do is to pull that out as well and pass that in as a property to example filter. So let's take the changes we've made to RNTester example container, and we'll just stash them, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. I'm glad that came up, because that kind of dead end happened a couple times to me as I was coding this out, but it's not a problem because it's revealing to you something you want to do first. Going back to this approach, I'm saying, hey, it's not easy to make the change yet. I want to go back and do some more refactoring to prepare. So let's go back and do that refactoring. And on the flip side, it's not a problem that I've done this in multiple steps. I think these steps are nice to be able to kind of walk someone through, like a code reviewer or myself in the future, and walk through the process to clarify what the dependencies are. So what I want to do is to take this filter, function out of here, and let's move it back up to here to RNTester example list. Let's put it here. And so we can change this to take in the filter regex as well, because that's coming in from the example filter component. We'll say, okay, take in the example, take in the filter regex. I think this formatter wants no spaces around that. We do need platform added back into here. It's okay to go back and forth a bit between a few different commits. There's no problem there. So now we have platform. Filter and sections, and so now we can pass filter to here, and we don't need disable search anymore because disable search is just taken in at this level, at the level of this function being passed in. Okay, so now that that's pulled out, we don't need the filter in here anymore. We're not hard coding. We are setting up the filter regex because that's part of the behavior of example filter. But really, example filter should just know about the filter box that we have. It shouldn't know about tvOS. That's far too specific. So we'll pull that out. We're going to filter by this.props.filter. Does that seem right? Oh, no, that's not right. We do still want a filter function here. But instead, what we're going to say is we're going to take... Does this look right? All right, let me do git show. Let me look at my cheater code here to make sure. Sorry for the pause here. Let me just think through it. Filters passed in there. Actually, let's do this. Disable search. We don't need disable search, but we can say instead of filter regex.tet. Sorry, y'all. I'm getting a little confused here. Let me look through my code to make sure I understand. RNTester example filter. There we are. This props filter. Yeah. Okay. So so instead of just direct, we don't move. Part of the deal, what we're trying to accomplish here is remove the knowledge of example.module.title out of RNTester example filter. And so what's going to happen instead is we're going to say, and also this knowledge, and we're going to say this.props.filter. So the filter we pass in from the example list, call this filter function. Pass in the example and the filter regex. We have the example from here, and then the filter regex from above. And then disable search also lives at this level, so we can remove that. That's slightly different from my cheater code. So this is the filter that's used here. Okay, so this is here. This is here. We're getting close to the end, so let's just briefly walk through this. All the knowledge of the disable search prop is kept up at the example list level. The knowledge of example.module.title, the knowledge of tvOS. So all those specifics are here. All that's happening in the example filter function here is we're saying, hey, we have a prop. You've given me a filter prop, and I'm going to call it. And I'm going to give it the example that I'm looking at. I'm going to give it the filter regex that I came up with, and then you decide, whatever it is we're filtering, you decide how to filter it. So this knowledge, we've moved this knowledge of the structure of the example up to the example list component. So let's reload and see if this has helped. Reload, we got the page, we got the button, it comes up. So let's run the tests. Let's see. Remember, we have our code stashed that's going to add filtering into the example container. And we'll come back to that in just a second. Once we confirm that this additional refactoring is in place. Let's just get those tests to pass, because I use a little confidence there to make sure everything's okay. Okay, we got the page coming up. Purple's been pressed, left has been pressed, right has been pressed. Good time. Detox is verifying all the things for us. We're on the example page. We reload the simulator. A little slow. It's coming. Cool. Searches, it's fine. It's good to go. So that refactor has been fine. Let's review. We don't got time to review the changes. So we'll say extract filter function to example lists. I'd probably do better commit descriptions before pushing up live, but that's good enough for now. So now we can do git stash pop to get our changes to example container back. And notice in those changes, it was only changes to RNTester example container. So let's see if we're better prepared now. So now in RNTester example container, we no longer need to pass in disable search. What we need to pass in is a filter. We need to say in this case, for this component now, how do I want to filter things? And we're going to take in the example and filter regex and decide whether we should filter it to include it or not. So for the example container, how do we apply the filter regex? I am forgetting what an example contains, so let's check and see. Button example has a list of .examples, and it has a title and a description. So I think what we just want here is that example.title, actually it's filter regex matches, is .matches what I want? .test. Example.title. I bet that Flow is going to want me to do this. Yeah, you want it on the same line? That's what you want? Okay. All right. Well, it wraps for us, but that's okay. So now let's review the diff. All we've added in the container is add the example filter, add this kind of like boilerplatey setup of sections and the filter itself, and then we drop in the RNTester example filter where we filter out the sections before we map through and render them. So that's a very small change. That's a very easy change. So let's run the tests. We're going to run a little bit over the 4 p.m. Eastern mark. But we'll try to be quick about this. And we don't have to look at flow changes, because that's not the way I roll. I'll handle that on my own time. I don't want to put that on y'all. Okay, check it out. We got a search box at the top of the page. It's not blowing up. So that's great. So our tests are still passing. Our tests aren't covering searching with the search box, but that's okay. We can stop the test for right now, and let's try it out by hand. So we tap on a button, and now let's just search for text, for fit to text layout. Search for text, and now check it out. It filters it down just to show that. Now to show the example that I wasn't able to do before, if we go down to the touchable screen, there's examples down below the fold. Touchable feedback events. And so I couldn't get to that easily in my automated test before, but if I just search for feedback, touchable without feedback comes up, but if we search for feedback events, it comes up on here. So the search is working. So that's awesome. So let's commit this change. Okay, So let's circle back and see what we did. And now I can explain what Kevin was asking about explaining this sequence a bit more in detail. For each desired change, make the change easy, then make the easy change. And so here's what we meant by that is, this last change we made to add the filtering was very easy. All we needed to do was add this existing component. Let me do this to remove this just to see if that still works, because that'll make it even nicer. Reload. I don't think that's probably needed anywhere. Shows up just fine. Disable button. That filters just fine. Okay, so I'm just going to commit that. Okay, so now looking at this change we made, all we had after that first work, the refactoring, where we didn't change any of the functionality of the app, we just restructured the code. After that, we were able just to drop in the filter, drop in a little configuration, and then wrap the existing rendering code with an RNTester example filter. And so this is the idea of separating out the refactoring for the implementing of the new functionality. We could have done this all at once, and let's actually, I forget the git command. If I do git diff from the initial commit to the head, is it going to show me all the changes at once? It looks like it. Yeah, check it out. So this is all the changes we've done as a part of this PR. So you could have done all of these at once if you wanted to. You added in a new import of the example filter and put it in this file, and then create the new example filter file and pull out just what's needed, and make sure that you know from the start that you needed a filter function that had some of the filtering functionality but not all of it, and know that you have the sections to loop through, and then the render text input in that file. And then in this file, what do you need to do? You need to pull that in, change that prop, remove just these things, but keep these other things in place in the render method. So this is a lot of changes at once. This would have been really hard and really slow to implement all this way. And it's really hard to code review as well. If you're pushing up a code review that has all of these changes in one big diff, it's hard to understand what's going on. It's hard to feel confident that what's happening really makes sense, and you have no protection of the existing tests to know what you have happening. But by contrast, as we made these other changes, first we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commits of refactoring. And at the end of the 5th commit of refactoring, the behavior of the application was exactly the same as it was before, and our tests were covering that. It's only in this last commit that we changed the functionality by adding in this new filter. And I would definitely want to cover that by a detox test as well. In fact, the whole point of this change is so that we can use detox to use the search box to better automate our tests. But this is the idea. The idea of this commit is make the change easy, then make the easy change. And just to help you visualize it one more time, when we go back to our initial state of the code that we were in, it was not easy to add filtering to the example container because we had an example list where the filtering functionality was all intermixed with the details of the example list and data and stuff specific to the example list. So it was hard to make this change all at once. So instead of just making the hard change, first you make the change easy and then you make the easy change. That's what we're talking about. Getting to the point where when you're adding new functionality, the changes are this small and this simple, and you can add a new test for them with confidence. That's the point of refactoring. Doing a refactor to set up your code, to clean it up, to not because it was bad before, but because you want to prepare that code for the new requirement. That's one of the big goals of refactoring, especially this kind of approach to small step refactoring, and that's what I like to do. So this has been a bit of a demonstration of that approach to refactoring. I hope it's been helpful. Hopefully this commit will be merged in soon to React Native. We've got some visual regression test stuff we need to figure out for some visual snapshots to make. I'm not sure if they're visual snapshots or just snapshots, but some kind of snapshots we got to get covered before we can get it merged in. But hopefully we'll be able to move things forward to get it so that you and I can contribute Detox Test to RNTester in the future. But when you think about your own projects, think about this approach to refactoring. Instead of jumping in, when you feel yourself moving in and making a bunch of changes at once, think if you can refactor first. Think if you can move things around in preparation for the change you need to make later. And I'm going to post some links in the show notes to some resources on refactoring. Martin Fowler has just released a new version of his book, Refactoring, that is written in JavaScript now, so that's great for us JavaScript developers to be able to get into it. But try out this approach and hit me up on the chat. Hit me up on Twitter at CodingItWrong. I'm on Reactive Flux Discord as well as Josh Justice. I'd love to talk to you about testing, refactoring, React, React Native, and your thoughts for how you structure your code and how you evolve your code base, or figure out some existing code that you didn't write to how to extract out functionality to better prepare for the future. Hey, thanks to Kevin and others who joined for the stream. And anybody who's checking this recording out afterwards, I'd love to talk to you about testing and refactoring. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Let's go to the slide. See ya.